Fantastic. Welcome to Personnel Board. I'll start off by with apologies. I have got one on behalf of Lou. Lou Timlin is going to be a little bit late tonight because she's got a clash of a town council meeting, but she will be joining us as soon as she can. Have we had any other apologies, Madeline?
Councillor Jorgensen.
Fantastic. Okay. And Yusra Salman isn't here. Hopefully she'll be joining us later. But yeah, I think that's everybody. So the next point 47, is minutes of the previous meeting. To confirm the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 7th of February 2025. We'll do that one first of all. Are there any comments about the minutes of that meeting? Yeah, who was there?
That's what I was trying to remember.
Yes.
It was for the Director of Public Health.
So, yeah, Rachel, Prue and Stephen were there. So I don't know if you've got any comments. Are you happy with those? You're happy with those minutes? Can I have one of you propose and one of you second? And all the rest of us prepared to float those through? Thank you very much. Okay. And then the next minutes that we need to consider are the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of February 2025. Are there any comments about those minutes? Okay. So I'm happy to propose those. Does somebody want to second? Stephen Conway second. All those in favour of adopting those minutes? Thank you very much. So the next point is public question time. I'm guessing we don't have any public questions, is that right? And member question time, is that the same? No member questions, thank you very much. So the next item is the Gender and Ethnicity Pay Gap Report. This is something which comes to us every year. We've had quite a bit of discussion about it this year. We do need to publish it. There is a legal requirement for us to publish this as an annual report by the end of March. But what Lou is going to do to allow for more discussion of this is once we get the figures for the gender pay gap for March 2025, and we look at the figures as of the last day of March 2025, we will go very quickly into discussion of those figures, and that's going to allow us much more room for discussion, much more scope to discuss what we might want to do positively to try and narrow the gender pay gap. We do have a gap in the pay between men and women in this organisation. Women are paid less than men. That's not because women are being paid less than men for doing the same job. It's because we have more women in the lower graded jobs, and that's an important distinction. We have a job evaluation system which helps us to keep pay fair and equal within the organisation. That's not to say that we couldn't do more to narrow the gender pay gap and to look at what we might be able to do to progress more women into the more senior levels of the organisation, into the higher paid roles. I think that's what I wanted to say, and I think I will hand over to you, Sally, to introduce the report.
I'll let you go. Yeah, you don't need lots of people, do you? Thank you, Rachel. Obviously, as Rachel's explained, it's a statutory report we have to publish every year because we employ more than 250 employees. Additionally, whilst there's no requirement for us to publish the ethnicity pay gap, we do this voluntarily. So I'm not going to read the report, I'll just highlight some of the points within there. So the pay gap is calculated against specific calculation requirements, and it uses mean and median average rates of hourly pay for males and females, and the same for the ethnic minority and non-ethnic minority. We split our pay bands into 4 quartiles, so PQ1 that's displayed represents the lower quartiles, and PQ4 is the higher quartiles. So a negative pay gap will show that in a gender pay scenario will show that females are paid more than males, and then a positive pay gap in the ethnicity pay will show that ethnic minorities are paid more than non-ethnic minorities. So for our mean gender pay gap is 11.83 and our median pay gap is 15.71. The median gap is more accurate because that looks at discounts and doesn't skew anything, so it will discount very high or low rates of pay. And then the national median gender pay gap was 14.3, so we are slightly above national reporting figures. Our mean ethnicity pay gap, however, is 5.65 and the median ethnicity pay gap is 4.26. So a positive pay gap will occur when minority groups earn more on average. So if you look at the comparison against last year, you'll see we've gone from a negative pay gap to a positive, which is good for the organisation. As I say, I'm not going to cover all the points off. We've got the mean and the median year on year, so it does show we have slightly increased in a median capacity, but we've then broken down our workforce demographics. So we are looking at a 75-25% split across the organisation, meaning that we do employ 75% of our workforce as being female. We then look at more females work for us part-time, flexibly work, or take career breaks, for example. So that's referenced within the report. But then it does highlight that within tiers 1 to 4 of the councils, that's the chief executive down to heads of service, we employ a higher percentage of females there. So you can see that on the split through the pay quartiles, which will be PQ4. We have a large range of roles and professions across the council, but it is correct to say the majority of our lower graded roles within the organisation will typically be occupied by females. The council does not have services that are provided in-house that would typically employ more males, so that would be your direct labour such as housing trades, highways delivery and waste. And then obviously it just moves on to reference that, again, the ethnicity pay gap is a positive one, meaning that ethnic minorities are paid on average more than non-ethnic minorities. And we can see that increase happening through our data, particularly into the higher pay quartiles, where we are now seeing succession and filling those roles with ethnic minorities as well. Towards the back of the report, we've got a table that shows some of the actions that we've taken to address the current gap. We've talked about the development of our people strategy, which commenced in 23-24. We've looked at EDI training for all council staff, so that will include unconscious bias. We've looked at collaboration with staff networks, and we've enhanced and improved family-friendly policies that would include, but isn't limited to, flexible working, increased caring leave, and things like career development opportunities as well, making sure that we can support work-life balance. And then we've got a section on actions that we're committed to undertaking. So that's expanding our equality monitoring, reviewing and recruiting our updatement and pay policy, working in collaboration with our staff networks even more to try and increase that within there, and then looking at EQI assessments to identify the impacts of recruitment processes to ensure there's no negative or disproportionate impacts. I think this report is due to be published by the end of the month. What we've recognised, as Rachel referenced, that we do need to bring this reporting forward. So this will come through at the same time as our workforce equalities monitoring report and our pay policy statement, which that goes on to full council. So these should come through. We're aiming for July board. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Louise?
Only the fact that also we've also been looking at benchmarking as well. I appreciate that our services are our services, but I don't think it hurts to look outside the organisation to learn from others. So I have had one meeting with Reading, because as I say, we know they report a zero pay gap. So it's a sort of understanding they've got quite a different makeup from the point of view of their services and are quite different. But I think you can always learn from others. So I'm very open to looking at learning from others. Bracknell is very similar to us and has a very similar breakdown of male-female, again, within the council. I've yet to get the more up-to-date information on our other Berkshire councils, but I am looking at that, and between us in our network as well, we do discuss these points. So I suppose it's just that thing of, I think we really do recognise this, and as a team, this is something you have to produce, but I want to get beyond just producing the report. It's getting under the report, really understanding those figures, and where we can sort of start to make some differences. It's the only points I wanted to add to what Sally had already said.
Fantastic. And
Apologies,
Rachel. And Stephen, I think you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you very much. And it's certainly very, very interesting to see these pay gaps. Well, the pay gap on the basis of gender and how different the situation is on the basis of ethnicity. I was very interested in the comparisons you were making with Reading, and going back to a point that Sally made earlier about whether you have direct labour organisations, and clearly Reading does, and I guess that's a factor. But to get to 0% pay gap would suggest it's more than that. They must be doing some things that perhaps we're not doing. Is there a sense that it goes over and beyond the structure of the workforce, the fact that they have a larger percentage of male employees than we do? Is there more to it than that, I wonder?
I think that is genuinely what we want to learn. From speaking to them, mainly the initial conversation was the makeup of the different organisations, and they definitely confirmed the difference in direct services. I think, as I say, waste, street cleansing, I think it's also housing, yes, maintenance.
Housing maintenance is the thing I'm most familiar with,
Yeah,
because of course they have been our contractor.
But also what we're looking at, there's also some government guidance as well around how you can make improvements. And as I said, I feel that we've made a lot of headway in a lot of areas in HR. And what we both sort of feel is that we've made some real changes, and I think we're starting to see some changes. Appreciating the makeup of our organisation is 75-25. What I want to understand is, as I say, are all the opportunities there for those staff, and it's looking at progression, career paths, which is something that we are now really heavily looking at from an organisational development perspective, from skills, knowledge, etc. So I feel the programme that we are working towards, I would like to think that we will be in a better position with that gap, and that's what we will be definitely working towards.
Just a final point before I let Rachel come in and ask her questions. I just wanted to commend all the work that HR has been doing, which is making a real difference. I mean, what is very striking, and it's obviously not represented in this report because it's only tangentially important to it, is the really impressive number of applicants we're getting for jobs. We'll be coming on to that later on. High quality applicants for posts that we're advertising, and the retention rate. And that all speaks to an organisation that is well respected from the outside, and I think the work that's been done in HR has been transformational. Having a people strategy, having a workforce strategy, all of these things are really beginning to bear fruit. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you for that.
Super, Rachel.
Thank you. So I wanted to look at the way we present the reasons for the gap first, and then also look at the actions. So in terms of the reasons, on page 18 of the pack, it does say, it can be concerning to note, the gap is 16%, but it says it's important to note the demographics of the council, and then we've got the bullet points. And the bullet points appear to sort of explain or try to explain the gap. And the first one is that there's more women than men. Now that doesn't in itself mean that you have a gender pay gap. That doesn't make sense to me. I know there are other reasons which you've explained, but I don't think you can say the simple reason why there's a gap is because we employ more women. That doesn't make logical sense. So I think we need to relook at that. And then also the second one, so more females work part-time. So again, that's sort of presented as if it's justifying the gap. Now we're looking at hourly pay of staff, aren't we? So there's technically no reason why someone who works part-time should be paid less per hour than someone who works full-time. Okay, so I think the way that comes across is almost to say, well, women work part-time often, so of course they're going to be paid less. I'm sure it wasn't meant like that, but that's when I read it, that's how it sort of comes across to me. So I think we need to look at the way that's worded, because I don't think that's a kind of fair sort of presentation of the reasons for the gap. Secondly, on the actions, which I think is the main thing that we should obviously draw from this rather than anything else. So I did have a look at last year's report actually, and it said that at that point, so a year ago, we'd be developing a robust process to investigate and identify where pay issues may be occurring and develop an action plan to address those. So I was wondering if that formal action plan was actually developed.
Yes, we did, and yes, we do have a project in place where we are reviewing at the moment our grades, looking at our job evaluation scheme as well, because I think and perhaps it hasn't come across terribly well, because as I say, I think we can always learn from obviously the way it's being presented, is that the job evaluation scheme is about equality and obviously making sure that like work is receiving the same pay, so there's not an equal pay perspective, so that between a male and female. But as you say, it's how we're sort of working towards the difference between the gender pay gap and the fact that strangely, and again, how are we attracting maybe males into some of those lower paid roles, as well as looking at how then females are again having the opportunity for progression through the other grades. So I think that's fair commentary, and as I say, I think we're always looking to learn, and we will definitely learn from this particular report and look at how we're sort of presenting it. I don't know if there's anything else you would want to add, but no, that's fine.
I mean, if I could just come back, I think it would be useful to have that, proper formal action plan with dates and, real tangible sort of actions that this group could then monitor, because I would like to see more. I understand, some of those actions are really sensible. Some of them are quite sort of high level. So, on the part-time issue, there's nothing in there about what are we doing to help part-time workers progress. It's probably going on, but it's not coming out here, so we don't get that assurance from the paper that's happening. Other things you've mentioned already, so things like sort of career development work and, I don't know, shadowing schemes and things, all of that sort of thing, which influences this is, we're not seeing that, so it's, it's quite hard to sort of review this and say, yes, that's fine as it is, because it doesn't look like there's enough there for me.
Just to come back on that, and I think that's a really fair comment. As I say, I feel that the work we've been doing around OD sounds quite low level, and we haven't been out there sort of really telling people what we're doing. Yes, we have been developing quite a lot, and I do feel that we will be able to bring in quite a number of initiatives just to demonstrate some of the things that we have been doing, and it's not just started. There's quite a number of things, but I also know this is an area where we really want to sort of look at how we're going to excel. How are we looking at all of the different learning opportunities within the organisation, that not just being through training initiatives, but actually experiences, being involved in different types of work. So again, that we're giving those sort of opportunities. As I say, we're making some real changes. But I take your point, and absolutely looking at a little bit more detail rather than that very high level, we will absolutely have. And in our work programmes, we have that, and perhaps we've done ourselves an injustice with not sharing some of that work on this opportunity.
Can I, before I bring Stephen in, because he had his hand up, just make one comment, and Louise mentioned it very quickly about the part-time pay. I think when you're looking at that bullet point, second bullet point on page 18, you do raise a very good point there, Rachel, about the way that it's been worded. But I did want to give some assurance that we're not paying people less because they are part-time. Now, clearly that would be wrong, that would be unlawful. I think what that bullet point is meant to be expressing, and Louise and Sally can let me know if I'm getting this wrong, is that women tend to occupy roles that were in the lower quartiles of the council, and part of the reasoning for that is because we have more women working part-time, doing flexible work, and women who are taking career breaks, and that has maybe affected their career trajectory. Now, you raised a very good point there, Rachel, is we need to look at what we can do as a council to see if we can minimise the effect that has, you know, as much as one employer can do. But absolutely, we're not paying anybody less because they are part-time. Stephen, did you want to ask a question?
I wanted to come back really on that very point about the composition of quartile 1 or PQ1, which I presume the lowest paid employees. We've already talked about the difference between Wokingham and Reading in the sense that Reading has DLOs dealing with a lot of things where you traditionally have a higher percentage of males in the workforce. I was rather intrigued to know what it was about our lower paid jobs that means they're more likely to be occupied by women than men. What are those jobs, and why do you think we have women disproportionately represented in those roles?
They're typically your roles such as customer services, libraries, administration, the majority of which are actual part-time jobs. So what we're looking at is how could we encourage males perhaps to take those roles up, but they're the typical roles that would sit in the pay quartile 1, which is the lower part of the pay scale, which would be comparable with if we had direct trades or similar roles like that would typically be a male, they'd be sat roughly in the same grading.
I'm sorry, I don't want to prolong discussion on this for too long, but it does occur to me also rather than perhaps trying to encourage more males to fulfill these roles, we might be thinking, what is it that means quite often, I suspect, the same women remain in that role and at that status and don't move on in the organisation? Are there obstacles that we ought to be trying to address so that more women progress up rather than remain perhaps stuck in the same position because of circumstances that mean they can't move up?
We've looked at, I think, to support females in the organisation to help them develop their career. We are family friendly, so we do have a high proportion of people that will work flexibly. We're not adverse to that. We have had people in some senior roles that have worked part-time for us. So it is showing that is something that we're open to as an organisation. And I think typically within those roles that you would see, such as libraries or customer service or the admin, it's about suitability, and that's what some of them actually want to do, that they've typically worked part-time for a long time and they aren't interested necessarily in developing their career. But we certainly have a programme of packages that would look at lower ends of pay quartiles about aspiring to develop more and how we can encourage that in the workplace as well.
Looking at the table on page 19, it's pretty clear that women are well represented in the higher quartiles, but there may be the scope for them being even more represented in PQ2 in particular, which is the kind of next.
Super, thank you. I think I've got Louise and then Yusra online.
So firstly, apologies for being late. So I think I probably had 2 points. So obviously the data that you have to report, it's a mandatory report. There's certain metrics that you have to report. Those are quite blunt, so it can be quite difficult to understand what's going on. So I think the example of, I'm assuming it was Reading Council you were talking about, if you have a high number of lower paid roles that are taken by men, that could actually mask an issue in the upper pay quartiles, which is why I think it is important that we do as much analysis on our data as we possibly can to really understand what's driving the figures so that we can put together the most robust action plan possible. And then my second point was we seem to keep talking around or giving reasons for women work part-time, therefore are paid less, that in quite blunt terms. So can we just really make it clear what we mean when we say that, which is the roles that are, and to my mind what it's saying is the roles that can be part-time are lower paid roles. And again, I'm being quite blunt. So I would just make sure that we have looked as much as possible that the more senior level roles are as flexible as they can be. So, because I think that's really important.
just come back on a couple of points. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Lou. I remember my. Sorry, Lou. So I agree about getting into the data and really getting into the detail. I please don't think that we haven't been interested in it. It's not that, but it is definitely something I think now that we've been here a couple of years, we've done made a lot of changes. I really now want to sort of see, it doesn't feel like it's changed much. We've been in a fairly similar situation. Maybe it's been slightly lower and now it's gone up very slightly again. I think we really need grade by grade, job by job. I really want to get that understanding so that, again, we can share that with you from a transparency perspective because, as I say, we have a job evaluation scheme. We're making sure that that isn't done just by one set of individuals. We look at that as a panel so that we don't have any issues from the point of view of the same people always looking at these processes, because for me it needs to be wider than that, so that there's a better understanding. I also think it tests the job evaluation scheme a little, because obviously there is still some subjectivity within that. We obviously try and make it as objective as we possibly can. I think we agree with you with some of the terminology, and we have spoken about that earlier, just around how we've described things, especially around part-time. And I think it would be good to maybe showcase or give some examples where we do have quite a number of senior roles that are female who are doing it are doing part-time work. So, and just demonstrating that flexibility within the organisation. So I think there's some more we can do to demonstrate what we're already doing, but then it's how do we grow from where we are to make things better. So I think I would say I'm in agreement with all of those points, and as I say, we will come back to you with that more detail so we can show how we're moving forward.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, just a really minor point. There's a typo at the bottom of page 20. It's that it says the quartile table below displays the distribution of females and males, whereas I think it should be the ethnic minority. So that just needs correcting.
Thank you. And I'm really sorry, Yusra. I left you out there. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, please. How can organizations reduce pay gap? For example, in terms of transparent pay policies, ensuring that pay structures are clear and based on objective criteria, probably bias training, diverse leadership, or maybe regular audits. So this is my first part of the question. My second question is something different, but it is correlated to it. So shall I tell the second part as well?
Yeah, yes, if you want to say your second part as well, that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. So what challenges do organizations face in addressing pay gaps? In terms of, I'm sure, data collection, gathering accurate and comprehensive data on gender and ethnicity can be challenging at times. And also, for example, cultural barriers, overcoming entrenched biases and cultural norms that contribute to pay disparities, or maybe retention and promotion. So there are two questions altogether. So if you could please tell, yeah.
I will attempt my best. So from the point of view of the challenges, I think,
how can we close the pay
how do we close the pay gap? So I think
Reduce, yes.
Sorry?
Yes, reduce the pay gap in organization, yes.
Yes, so I think this is where we were talking about understanding our data, making sure that we've got clear career paths for all members of staff within the organisation, but appreciating that we have a 75% female to male ratio. So it's ensuring that the same opportunities are there for those that are perhaps part-time as well as full-time. I will say this, and I will make this statement, we always will ensure that that opportunity is there, but maybe we need to be more overt with it, because as I said, the roles and maybe the way we look at internal recruitment, because again, we're very keen to look at how we are growing our own. So we're also looking at succession planning. We're also devising some a new course called Future Leaders. So this is for aspiring managers, for example, and we want to have a scheme whereby a number of aspiring managers are within that scheme. It's not something that's just you go along for a learning initiative. That might be part of it, but there's mentoring, coaching, maybe different experiences that people are open to. So hopefully that gives you a sort of a flavour of some of the things that we can do to look at our pay gap. I think understanding our data is really important, and I think we've made that commitment just to really look at our data a little bit closer.
Sure.
But I think that probably covers the first part of the question. With
This is actually related to second part, the data collection thing. I think it's related to my
Yes.
second questions,
Yes,
because
okay.
what challenges do organizations face in addressing pay gaps? Yeah, so the data collection would be very crucial role in it.
Okay.
If you want to give answer the second part, please.
Yeah.
I think it's just...
Yeah, if you want to, that's fine.
I think it's about the disclosure rates on the data. So we do face challenges where we have data gaps because not everyone will declare it. I think it's easier for a male-female declaration. But when it comes to ethnicity, I think it's referenced within the report that we do have a high amount of employees that haven't declared anything or they prefer not to say. So that is a challenge we do face. Yusra, we do actively encourage everyone to disclose data where they can. And it's something that we do on a regular basis. So there are regular updates that go out to teams, to managers, to make sure that the data collection's there. We've built it into our APR process, which is due in Q1 for the next financial year. So we've built that into the annual performance review form as well to make sure that everyone's data's up to date. So we do, that's a huge challenge, I think, for us as an organisation, is getting people to declare their data. So but we do as much as we can with it.
Going to say staff networks.
And the staff networks are great ambassadors for us. So our ethnicity data previously in the workforce equalities is quite low on data collection, but through the staff networks, through our ethnically diverse staff network, we managed to see quite a high increase in declarations. So where we were reporting previously, I think it was about 50 to 60%, we were on up to about 80-90% declarations. So that is ultimately the challenge we do face with the data sets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's a really helpful segue into my question, because unsurprisingly, given the scale of the gap, we've focused on gender pay gap. But there's a really interesting story, at least told by the median results, about a quite dramatic shift in the ethnicity pay gap in a positive direction, not a negative one. And I was wondering how we accounted for that. I mean, part of it may be what you just described, Sally. We've got more people telling us and engaging with us, and therefore the data is getting more accurate. Do you think that is the only explanation, or are there any others? Have we done anything to try and address what was a much less notable gap, but still a gap in a negative sense?
Yeah, Steve, I think part of it will be the fact that we have better data, and I wouldn't, but we have been working with, as I say, our staff networks very closely. I think the engagement that we now have, and we encourage for people to come forward. But I would, I think there's lots of more work. We've got an action plan that we've even got with that group of how we can again continue to make improvements. We've been getting them involved with the service director recruitment, for example. So I think we're just opening up a lot of different channels now with regard to just making sure that people appreciate that they can come and talk to us, and and sort of we can look at different ways of understanding things. But as I say, I think mainly it's probably the data that's doing it.
I think as well, when it comes to, Louise has mentioned about the ethnically diverse staff network, we do work with them really closely. So we're looking at opportunities for people from an ethnic background to develop and succeed within the organisation. We're supporting individuals to go on leadership programs as well. So we've supported one individual this year, and we're going for 2 next year. So we are seeing a slight increase into those upper pay quartiles if we're looking at the ethnicity pay gap. But I do think data collection will have helped change the figures as well. So
the obvious footnote to that is there anything to learn from what we've done in helping bridge the ethnicity pay gap that would help with the gender pay gap?
Go on, Prue.
I have another question. I forgot what the technical word for it is. What about women who are also from the global majority? Have we got any split of the gaps by gender and ethnicity?
Not in this particular report. Our workforce equalities report will look at that most definitely, and that's why we want to couple all of these reports together, so that again we're talking holistically about the situation rather than in part 1, part 2, part 3. So we will definitely, when we bring this group of reports back, you will see that together. Going back to, I think, what Stephen asked about what we can learn, I think we can always learn. I think it is those different groups that we're setting up. We've, through the colleague conference, there was a request around having some support around menopause, etc. We have done a huge amount of work around just raising awareness. We've put some training courses in for male and female. It's not just for female. I think there's an informal forum group that meets as well. So I think the learning from that network, the networks, is what we've then been using to then establish that. But also listening to our staff, and they raised it, and then we've tried to follow it through. Yeah.
Super, thank you very much. Lou, you and I, between us, have got a number of comments that we wanted to make. I don't know if you want to make a start on that, and we can kind of take it in turns, maybe.
Sure, can do, yeah. We up to this one here, second point. Yeah, so on page 16 in the executive summary, so I sound really northern because I've been up north, someone's just told me that. I can even
We
hear
won't
it
hold it
myself.
against you.
It's the last paragraph, and it's not the first sentence, but then the rest of it. It's a really, really long sentence. It says, whilst the report demonstrates a strong position and that we do not have a pay system that disadvantages staff, it is recognised that with 75% of the workforce being female, and I won't carry on, but basically the sentence doesn't make any sense. I've read it like 4 times. So can you just maybe have a think about what you think it's supposed to mean and break it down? But I think, so Rachel and I between us thought that what some of the things you could say is that you do have a job evaluation system to make sure you're providing a fair pay structure and taking other steps to ensure that we're paying our staff fairly. And then there's another piece around staff employed by different councils will vary. This can affect the demographics of the staff employed. So we need to be careful comparing one council's gender pay gap with another, which is the point we made previously. And then go on to give you an example of what that might be. So we think that's what you mean, but can you have a look and tell us if that's right?
And if I kind of close that off by saying that that paragraph did talk about the fact that we got about 75% of the workforce is female. I was, and Lou and I have actually discussed this, but on page 19 we talk about the pay gap existing because of us largely employing female workers, and I was wondering if we could refine that to say something like our gender pay gap exists because we have more female workers employed in the lowest paid jobs. And I think it's something that you said earlier, Rachel, which is that the fact that we have more women than men working for the council wouldn't necessarily lead to a gender pay gap. It's the fact that they are disproportionately concentrated in those lower paid jobs. So, did you want to leave with the next one?
Yeah, page 18, where we've got. Oh yeah, there's a sentence on the bullet points. Within tiers 1 to 4 of the council, there's a higher percentage of females occupying these roles. If this is a public document, I don't think that's going to mean a lot to people. So it doesn't mean a lot to me either, to be honest with you. The tiers 1 to 4, and then
Shall I talk about the next bit?
Yeah.
Because I think I wrote the next. So what I was going to suggest is that we use wording something like, within each pay quartile, there are more women than men. I think that's true, isn't it? Including the highest paid quartile. This reflects our success in recruiting and promoting women into the most senior roles in the council. At the same time, we note that the majority of employees in the lowest paid quartile are female. And I was also going to suggest we talk in this point about tiers 1 to 4, and then in a couple of other places where we've got tables, we've got PQ1, PQ2, PQ3, and so on. If we could have one consistent terminology that we use throughout the document, and then actually make it clear what we're talking about when we talk about PQ1, because my very natural assumption when I looked at PQ1 is I thought we were meaning the lowest quartile, and it's actually the highest paid quartile.
No, it's
isn't
not.
it?
It's the lowest.
It is the lowest paid quartile.
So it goes lowest to highest.
Ah, right. Okay. If we could, if we could label what those and define very carefully what those quartiles are, so that people can tell at a glance, that would be really useful. Did you want to talk about that next one there, Lou?
Which page is it? Page 20. Well, it's actually in the executive summary as well. When we talk about the gender pay gap and then the ethnicity pay gap, your brain kind of assumes what the reference group is. You assume that the reference group is men and the reference group is people not from an ethnic minority. So the plus and the minuses start to fry your brain, quite frankly. It's not clear which direction. So I think you just need a couple of this on the executive summary on paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's clear you've put a positive pay gap occurs when minority groups earn more on average. So I think you just need to say the same thing in the previous paragraph to reflect that it's the opposite.
There is a word, as we've gone back through, there is a word missing. It should say a positive pay gap for ethnicity.
Yeah.
I've recognised there's a word missing, so we'll be putting that back in.
And even in the tables, it's just because the reference group isn't what your brain automatically thinks it is. Rachel, you're nodding at me, so yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Prue is nodding as well. And I actually had a very closely linked suggestion, which is on page 16 of the report. We explain that a positive pay gap occurs when minority groups earn more on average. And then on page 18 of the report, we say a positive pay gap shows that females earn less than males. But actually, I think we need both statements within the executive summary, and then as a reminder, we need both statements. So we need each statement by the relevant set of figures, and that would help people to understand the figures. Thanks very much. So we've spent quite a long time looking through that report, and we're going to be revisiting this issue quite soon when we get the figures for March 2025. Are there any final comments or questions before we close out this point? Rachel.
Are we actually approving it this evening then, or how does that? Because I think the recommendation says we need to approve it for publication, but how are we going to do that if it's not ready?
Stephen,
yes, the way we do it is delegate to the chair in consultation with Louise to make the amendments and corrections that we've indicated.
That sounds
Are you happy with that?
No, personally, I wouldn't. I would like to see it before I sort of give my personally, but you know, because I think there's quite a lot to fix in it.
I understand. I mean, as Prue's just said, we could circulate it for email sign-off if that's thought to be necessary.
If we appreciated those amount of, we would have made sure those were picked up before publication. So.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, because typically when we have a scenario like this, we can make that, you know, we can make that part of what we're voting on. But because we have discussed quite a number of questions tonight, I think that it would be good to circulate it before. So I think the final recommendation is that we note the information contained within the report, that we will make the changes which we have discussed tonight, that it will be circulated to the members of the Personnel Board with a view to publishing it by the 31st of March. 30th of March, which actually means the 28th, doesn't it? Because the Friday's the 20th, but before the 28th of March. Yes, I will propose that. Does anybody want to second
could
it?
I suggest that if we're going to do that, we need to very clearly have a hard deadline for responding. We can't wait for everyone to respond.
Yes.
It's got to be response by, almost by return.
So it's the figures that are actually published, not the wording. So the figures are not incorrect. I appreciate the terminology and I appreciate we need to update that. But yeah, I mean, we'll make the changes tomorrow. So we will have the changes made to the report with regard to just sort of checking some of the terms that will be done by the close of play tomorrow. So we'll send that out tomorrow.
Yeah.
But with the view that we will write it in such a way that if we don't hear from you, we will be publishing on the 28th. Because, as I say, appreciating we will prompt and just sort of make sure that we've heard from you.
And I would make a suggestion that we get comments back by close of play on the 26th, so that Louise and Sally have got the time then to make the final changes to the report before publication. Is everybody happy with that? Super. Okay. I think we still need to vote on that rather complicated proposal. So if I propose it, does somebody want to second on that? Prue has seconded it. Everybody happy to vote for that? Thank you very much, and thank you for all of the scrutiny and the comments and the discussion tonight. It's really appreciated. So the next item is a recruitment item, and it contains personal details of candidates. For that reason, we need to exclude the public. So I'm going to read out the standard clauses I need to read out. That's under section 100A, brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1 and 2 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, as amended, as appropriate. Are you in favour? Yeah.